the first time we've attempted this type of series, whether 10T or 1RT. We have, as you know, and the audience knows, is we're a prolific investor in the growth stage in the digital asset, crypto, blockchain, Bitcoin space, however you want to call it. I think the space is still searching for a description. People seem to have different views about what's going on in this world and characterize them in a different way. But we've been very active here for the past 5 years, and I've been involved in the space actually since 2013. And before that, as a macro fund manager at various well-known funds, and had my own fund, started my own gold business, and et cetera, et cetera. But this is not today about me. We've decided to embark on this series. We're calling it, what is it, Building on Blockchain. I think that maybe, Adam, you can later talk about how that might be connected to what you're doing. It's a little less so with Ledn versus our other companies, but this is really sort of an educational, I would call it, seminar or symposium. We'd like to get people outside of the digital asset space, traditional financial people, traditional investors, to just understand that there are real, legitimate, growing businesses in this space. To explain to them what they do, to introduce some of the leadership to the outside world. And this is our first one, so I don't know how it's going to go. Hopefully okay. And we'll take some questions at the end. But why don't I just open it up to you? Why don't you just give a short little bio about yourself and then about what Ledn does?
Of course. Thank you, Dan, and appreciate being the first guest on this new series. So I'm Adam Reeds. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Ledn. My background is actually in energy investing. So I spent 12 years building large infrastructure projects and working a lot with pension funds and life insurance companies to get them exposure to long dated yield in those types of assets, and got introduced to Bitcoin and other digital assets through my co-founder, Mauricio, who was actually a classmate of mine at university in Canada. And really the initiation of Ledn came out of conversations we were having about fairness of financial services and money. I grew up in Canada, which is pretty much as fair as it gets when it comes to financial services and respect for government and all the things that we think about making up a society. And Mauricio grew up in Venezuela, which could be probably the polar opposite, especially as of late with what they've went through. And we talked a lot about accessing different types of products. And for me, it was pretty simple. Everyone in Canada that I knew had access to different types of financial services. And for me, Mauricio was only for the elite. And we got into Bitcoin mining first off because he was coming back from Venezuela after spending, a few years after school, starting different entrepreneurial ventures, and returned to Canada. And I was his good friend that was involved in energy, so he started asking me where to get cheap power. And because I was working in the sector, I knew a lot about that. And we set up a mining operation in Canada to mine Bitcoin, and then tried to approach the banks. And I went, about how I was used to going about accessing financing and in my background. And to our surprise, the banks wouldn't even let us open up a bank account, let alone provide a loan for our expanding mining operations. So that was the background of how we came up with the idea. And like most entrepreneurial ventures, it really started from solving our own problems. So that was the setup of it. We can get into a lot more from there.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, Bitcoin mining is extremely complicated. I know all of the variables that go into making decisions and which machines to buy. And I mean, I even to this day, I find it sort of opaque, and when to buy machines that are secondhand. And what was the most challenging? I know this doesn't really have any application really to Ledn, but I always wonder, what was the most challenging thing in the setup of the Bitcoin miner? And then why did you stop? Because there are a tremendous number of profitable Bitcoin miners. We even own one of them in the portfolio.
Yeah, I think the most challenging thing for us, and the reason we started the lending business was timing. You have all of your expenses when you're mining in traditional space. Is you have to buy electricity, you have to buy machines, which are priced in dollars, and you've got revenue in Bitcoin. So the Bitcoin price in dollar terms is fluctuating, and you're trying to manage that cash flow. And you kind of have one chance to get it right at the beginning too. You have to locate in the best place, and then if you get your power price wrong, there's others that are more competitive that will outmine you. So the setup of it's very important, and it's an economies of scale business. So you need massive amounts of capital to get it going, and then again you have to time it. So for us, we didn't want to sell our Bitcoin because we'd always time that wrong. It's important. It's impossible to sell at the peak. You have to be obviously the ability to pick the future, and so that's why we thought, well, what if we could get a line of credit product and build a almost like a traditional line of credit around it? And so that was the premise for our loan piece. So I would say again, the most difficult piece was the problem we were trying to solve was getting liquidity for that so that we didn't have to sell it and we could maintain the upside in the price. And I think a lot of the miners have been successful because the public mining stocks were kind of the pre-emphasis to Bitcoin ETFs. Really, they were a proxy for Bitcoin before the ETFs were approved. So I think that they've learned to hold more and more reserves, and that's been an important piece of the mining success.
Hmm. When did you first realize that, or when did you have the epiphany that, wow, we could start a borrow and lend business, and that this actually could be what maybe future banking looks like with Bitcoin? You were Bitcoin only for a long time,
Yeah.
and you still primarily are Bitcoin focused. And again, you and I have talked a lot about the difference between Bitcoin and I think to some degree ETH and the other uh, projects in the space. I mean, Solana is now coming along a little bit, but when did you realize that like wow, this could be like a whole new banking system?
Yeah, I mean, I was spending years looking at power projects, and everything was so jurisdictional. So when I set up a power project and I brought it to an investment committee and it was in Canada, people felt good about it. But I actually tried to bring a power project in Puerto Rico, and Puerto Rico has had a ton of issues with the power system there, and you've got a quasi public utility in Puerto Rico, and the aspects of the project in Puerto Rico, even though Puerto Rico is quasi part of the U.S., were so different than the projects that we were looking at in Canada. So everything was so specific to where it was, even though the solar panels were the same or the wind turbines were pretty much the same. There was all these attributes that got in the way depending on where it was. And what I loved about Bitcoin when I got into it, it was like, wait a second, the Bitcoin that someone holds in Venezuela is the exact same that someone holds in Canada or Spain or wherever you are. And you can suddenly have this like fairness unlock because the collateral is so pristine. I mean, you spent years in gold, and even gold, you're going to care a lot about what vault it's in. Is it in the Bank of England or is the gold in Thailand? And there's a lot of different risks depending on where that gold sits. So that's what we really opened up the door for us was this idea that the collateral that you're going to be financing is exactly the same. So it's a pretty revolutionary concept, and then you can build a lot of things on it.
It's kind of simple at the end of the day. And I always call Bitcoin, the greatest, truly, and maybe the only global macro trade of all time, because no other asset is as global. And you call it multi-jurisdictional, but I mean, it's incredible, how true that is. I hear you. I hear you on that. And of course, then backed by the proof of work algorithm, which, as you know, as a miner, maintains the integrity of the security behind it, right? It's pristine
Yeah.
collateral because the code is super secure. Maybe the most secure code that has ever been. And so building on top of it is actually something that's more recent, I think. Certainly when you started, when we invested, it led to 21. It was people were still Bitcoiners, especially not really interested in programming on top or building on top of Bitcoin. But maybe tell the audience a little bit about sort of the nuts and bolts of what Ledn does. Like, take us through who your clients are, what are their needs, and how do you service them?
Of course, happy to. So we really have, broadly speaking, two different products with two different types of customers. So the first product that we launched, that is the most popular product today, is our Bitcoin or Ethereum backed dollar loan. So the borrower side for this product is an individual or small business that holds Bitcoin or Ethereum and does not want to sell it. A, because they don't want to lose, most importantly, they don't want to lose the potential future gain of the asset, or they don't want to pay taxes on it today. And this is very common with what people do with private stock or public stock as well. You don't sell the asset if you want to hold it; you borrow against it, and that has borrower customer. Then again, is an individual or small business, and it has the lender, which for us is large institutions that want to earn yield on dollars. So that's product one. On that product, we've done almost 960 million now in the last 6 years of those types of loans. The other product that we've launched is a yield product that pays yield on Bitcoin or Ethereum. And the use case for that product was actually a couple different things, but one that's very relevant this year is market making ETFs. So institutions need to borrow Bitcoin or need to borrow soon to be ETH as well with the recent approvals to make sure that they can bridge this traditional gap settlement where it takes a couple days. If I want to buy BlackRock ETF, I want it in my account today. But the old world takes a couple days before they do all the paperwork behind the scenes and make the actual certificates and move it into custody. But the new world settles in seconds. So we can lend that Bitcoin to an institution who can deliver that Bitcoin to BlackRock to create the ETF, to move it in the account. And it creates this interesting yield opportunity for those, again, that want to hold Bitcoin or ETH for the long term, earn a little bit of yield, and lend it to institutions with large balance sheets who have this use case for it. So we've got a yield product and we've got a borrow product. And that's what we've done a lot of business on. And on the second product, we've done 6.5 billion since inception. So there's a lot of demand for that product as well.
I mean, it seems to like inherently why we invested. It makes so much sense to me because I think about how many people, specifically in the space, are sitting on Bitcoin. They bought it at $30. They're long, and all of a sudden, they're 29 years old or 30 years old, and they're still living in grandma's basement because they've got $9 million worth of Bitcoin that they just can't bring themselves to sell. And
Exactly.
I just thought, like, how many? Look, I don't sell my Bitcoin either. I mean, I understand that in a deep way, but for many of them to be able to borrow, let's say, $1 million, right, against that 9 million stake, and you can explain the details in a second, but and to be able to get out of grandma's basement and into an apartment seems like a really huge need. And again, I think people outside the space maybe don't realize just how many people there are like that because it's a whole younger generation. Do I think you also do you make mortgage loans as well, or do you make loans to people who then take out mortgages based on the cash you deliver? How?
Yeah, we actually piloted a mortgage product where we were taking the real estate as collateral as well. We did that in Canada, where again we got started years ago, which was an interesting experiment. But we actually curtailed it because it was so much slower. Because we have to get all these individual mortgage approvals, and the licensing and the regulations are so tied to small geographies that it just didn't scale as fast as their traditional digital asset business. So we still have that use case today. So we have a lot of clients that are borrowing against their Bitcoin or Ethereum, using the proceeds to buy loans, but we haven't made the mortgage where you double collateralize as available globally. But to your point about the narrative that's changing is, like, I myself last year we moved Ledn from Canada to the Cayman Islands because the regulation there is excellent for digital assets, and they've got this really forward-looking framework for the business. So I've moved my entire financial life from Canada to Cayman Islands and had to redo everything. So I've got a house in Canada, I had a mortgage in Canada, I had a bank account with this little bank statement since I was 6 years old, and I had this, and that all was kind of irrelevant when I moved over, except my Bitcoin. The Bitcoin part was easy. Obviously, you have to figure out the tax aspect of it. You have to move that, but the asset itself is the same. So it was easy to move that. But I think the youngest, smartest, and probably in the future the most wealthy people are the most mobile, right? Like it's these brains that can go anywhere now. So this idea of this physical address or this property that you're saving towards, this idea that that's the most achievable thing that you'd like to do financially is build this primary residence and use that as your asset. I think that's going away. I think it's going to
Yeah.
be digital, and there's going to be a whole bunch of new services that are built on to service that new portfolio.
Yeah, I mean, it won't go away right away. People do need to live somewhere, but I do think that younger people are more likely to rent and build their savings up. I don't want to say specifically Bitcoin or ETH, but I think there are a tremendous number of younger people that are living like that, and moving. Yeah, Cayman, Dubai. There are places. Switzerland has now become even more of a hub for crypto people. So I do think that's interesting. Um, it's still taking time, though, for what we call just generalized adoption, and the ETFs have helped. What do you see as sort of, you're out there pounding the pavement. I see you. You're in Singapore. You're in Dubai. You're in London. What is the hurdle towards gaining, us moving towards adoption quickly? What's some of the pushback sometimes that you hear?
I think it's standardization, right? There's so many different ways to hold Bitcoin. Whether forget about the categories, right? There's a lot of different ETFs you can buy. There's a lot of different exchanges to buy Bitcoin on. Are you going to hold it on the exchange? Are you going to self custody it? There's a lot of different hardware wallets to buy. So it's this lack of consistency and standards that I think are holding people back. There's so much to absorb to think about how to getting on first base into this piece. So and both at the institutional level and just regular people that want to buy this stuff and hold it. So it's that information overload and optionality, that there's too many options to get into it. So I think that's one. And then on the lending side, we always say, like, our clients aren't everyday people on the street because they have to be in the asset class first. Our clients are Coinbase's clients, those that are already on it. So for us, our client acquisition is a bit further down the road. And so there's a lot of people out there that own Bitcoin, but it's still fairly niche when you think about it distributed globally. So our challenge is finding them and making it compelling for them to take about loans. So I always find, like, we have two types of customers: those that don't know loans exist yet, and those that are already shopping for a loan. And so which one are we trying to convince? Are we trying to convince them to get a loan and then choose us? Or are we trying to convince them to choose us after they know that loans exist? And I think most of them are in the former category.
Well, what's interesting is you don't really have that much competition. I when I first, thought about the idea of borrow and lend on Bitcoin, I guess it was in 2018. I just thought it was like the most brilliant, idea. The TAM of the space is trillions of dollars. Maybe talk us through, in the audience, a little bit through why that is, and you can get into your history as well a little bit, because you're essentially the only centralized lender that survived the 3AC, BlockFi, et cetera, meltdown. Um,
Yeah, of
so maybe talk a little bit about the history of how you navigated that, um,
course.
and then maybe that's the explanation for not having much competition. I don't know. You tell me.
Yeah, look, I mean, I say this all the time, Dan, but our favorite saying in the company is the best restaurants have the smallest menu. And what I mean by that is, like, if you show up and there's only five choices, they all better be good. And you don't have this like buyer anxiety because you're like, okay, I like the steak, or I like the chicken, or I'm a vegetarian. There's like three things, right? And then maybe there's an appetizer and a dessert, but you don't have to think too much. And when you set up a company that way, it's not only is the upfront, the where people eat simpler, the client side simpler, but the back end, the kitchen, is way simpler because you don't have to keep 50 ingredients and worrying about them expiring and trying to match and do all this fancy footwork to keep things going. So that's what we did. I mean, Celsius, that's no longer around, they supported 50 different assets. They were doing all types of things to pay yield on those assets, and that led to their problems, right? So not only did they offer yield on assets that didn't have real marketability for, Because of that, they swapped assets and took directional risk and even took 10-year risk when they went to pay on that. So we only supported Bitcoin for the longest time and USDC, one of the major stable coins. We recently added, ironically, Ethereum and Tether because we supported the Celsius clients that were in bankruptcy, refinancing into Ledn. So that's why we actually added those two assets after many years of studying them to make sure that we could support proper lending on it. So that was, the main setup is keep it really simple and you'll provide a better client offering and be okay with saying no to some things. We get asked all the time, can we lend against some, asset that might be, past the top 10 on the coin market cap? And the answer is no, because if we did that, we'd be putting other client assets at risk that don't have the similar, proper risk aspects of them. So, that's really the concept of it is keep it dead simple and you'll provide a better experience. And, all the best brands do this, right? You go to buy an Apple computer, there's good, better, best. Tesla kind of has the same. When you go at, Model S or the basic one, just keep it really, really simple and you'll provide a better client experience overall.
Yeah, I have the same view, and all my guys hear that from me all the time. Just keep it simple. If you can't explain it, Peter Lynch, the great investor, used to say, if you can't explain it in 3 sentences or less to an 8-year-old, it's a bad idea. Something
Yeah.
like that.
Hmm.
And I love that about your business, the focus of it. And it's the same thing with us. We don't really do venture at all, right? Or seed or pre-seed or token trading. There's so many ways to get distracted in our space, right? You got RWAs,
Absolutely.
and I mean, every 6 months there's something new coming along. We really stick to our knitting, and I agree with you 100%, that's the way to go. And I think that really did help you navigate through the bear phase. And also maybe talk a little bit about the business, because not only, do you have to be adept at marketing and sourcing clients, but, managing the business. How have you grown? And what things have you learned, managing this business over the last 5 years? I ask that simply because most of the people on the call, are involved in some sort of business. So maybe, they can understand some of the things that you've learned and gone through.
Yeah, it's been a great journey and I appreciate the question. I think, I'm a math guy, so I'm an engineer by training. And, as I was setting up the business, I was super concerned about the technicalities and our liquidation engine. So, we're going to bring in Bitcoin. Obviously the common view is it's a volatile asset. I mean, it is, but so is Tesla stock that, banks are fine to provide margin lending against. So, that's one aspect of it. So you have to get the technical side of it right. You have to make sure you understand how to hold Bitcoin securely. You have to custody it properly, and you have to have all the rails set up to be able to liquidate it if clients don't pay back the loan. But what actually was, the biggest learning for me in the early days was the client service aspect of it, right? You're dealing with loans, you're dealing with pieces, and when do you get the most questions in the highest, volatility aspect when you're trying to manage everything? Everyone asks you all at once how to manage their loan, how to top up their Bitcoin, how to make sure they don't get liquidated, and you get a flood of inquiries. So how do you manage that, super high demand at all of one time when you've got that aspect? So we improved the client service a lot, and that's been a focus of it. And especially, we also get asked a lot, how do we differentiate from DeFi and the more pure technical protocols that
I was
have
going
come
to
into
ask.
the space? Yeah, it's the human aspect of what we're doing, right? At the end of the day, most people like to talk about the future of their, financial prosperity with other people. And that's the aspect that we provide is being able to provide that strong client service and tell them in simple language how the loans work and make sure they understand it. And we've also been able to provide support in Spanish and French and Portuguese and other languages to help more people come into the space by being a bit more global in our approach to it. So it's definitely the client side that's been the biggest learning for me. Again, I come from an investment background. I don't come from a consumer business, so that's been the main learning for myself as CEO is making sure that we spend the most time on that and always listen. So before we launch anything new, our client success team is the most important from what's going on. What are people telling us? That's the pulse on the market is the real information that we're getting from conversations about how clients are interacting with the products that we're trying to make better every day.
Yeah, exactly. But maybe touch a little bit on this DeFi. Now, some people on the call may not know what DeFi is: decentralized finance. And there's quite a lot of borrow and lend on things like Aave in the DeFi world. And some originally 4 or 5 years ago thought, well, there's no future for CeFi, which is centralized borrow and lend um, um, with uh, with a centralized entity such as Ledn, because the space is naturally floating towards a DeFi type of world. So
Yeah.
you get that question a ton. So why do you think, let's say, over the next 5 years, that there is a place for CeFi?
Of course, yeah. So I think on the product level, DeFi has proven to be very strong at single transactions. So this is, think about Uniswap is another popular one for trading, where you're getting, pricing one asset against the other. The thing that it's challenged with today is longer term outlook. And so what I mean by that is we provide loans to our clients on a 12-month term with the flexibility that they can repay us at any time, but we commit to have that loan open for a year and also commit to match the interest rate is consistent for that full year. The challenge with doing that on DeFi is you have to have the amount of capital matched to that. You have to have tenure matching on the supply side and the demand side. So Aave today has fluctuating rates. So it works on a variable side because if there isn't enough supply of capital, they can increase the rate, bring more dollars into it, but then the borrower is stuck with paying a higher rate. So if I'm going to say, buy, I want to, maybe I'm going to do some financial trade and I want to sell, borrow against my Bitcoin to buy some high yield bond or something where I'm locking in a yield where you can't really lock in that investment spread if you're doing that with a variable rate borrow. So it's been challenging to do that on DeFi. DeFi's made some attempts to do this with kind of peer-to-peer matching where clients post, hey, I'd like to borrow, $500,000 for 6 months, and this is the rate I'm willing to pay. But the user experience to date has been quite poor because it's not an efficient market and you're waiting for someone to see that offer and then show up, maybe a couple of weeks later. So we can provide, the financing, clients know the rate, same day, you can get the loan approved, typically next day or even the same day they have it in their bank account. So it's all really quick and known. So that's the aspect of it. And then the second one would be back to what I said before is the human aspect of it is you have a question. Well, in most DeFi protocols, by nature, there's no customer service, there's no client service to answer questions about that. And there may be also a technical level that you need to get to before you're comfortable interacting with smart contracts or this type of protocol.
Yeah, I've always thought that there's room for both CeFi and DeFi. People, I think 5 years ago started to talk about, well, is there Coinbase even going to exist?
Right.
And I think we're so early in terms of, I would call what I call the digitization of value, this move towards blockchain usage for all things of value, that you're going to have both. There are people who prefer to interact purely on chain, and that would be with DeFi. And maybe they don't mind waiting, right? Maybe they like the fact that it's not centralized because that's a,
Yep.
a theme of the space. And they're willing to give up some of the amenities that you provide, right?
Yeah.
For me, I see huge need and a huge comfort level that people have, knowing that there is a trusted centralized entity helping me with this new stuff in this new world, right?
Right.
And again,
Exactly.
it not excuse me, not everything has to be of the exact ethos of the Bitcoin, world. That everything is completely decentralized, that, all of the things that deep dive in the world Bitcoiners need. I think if you're a person who wants exposure to the asset and who wants to borrow against it, it's just the orders of complexity also of getting involved in DeFi is just magnitude greater. And so,
That's right.
but let me ask you, because you are acting as a trusted party, people in the old world think, well, there must be some credit risk, right? How do you deal with that when people come in and they say, well, your balance sheet is not JP Morgan's, why should I trust you with my Bitcoin?
Of course, yeah. So the first one is we're regulated. So Ledn has a virtual asset service provider registration in the Cayman Islands, which is again a great regime for operating a digital asset business. And the second one is optional, but we chose to do it years ago, is we introduced a proof of reserves report where any client can check that Ledn, their assets are accounted for in our reporting. And we invite a public accounting firm, they're called the network firm, that's based in the US, to run this process on Ledn. So it's a really simple process, but they prove, of course, that our assets are greater than our liabilities. And we actually just released the last report, last week, to update that. And we're going to increase the frequency of that over time, but that's what we've done to date. And we were the first lender to actually, work on this with this public accounting firm, and it's been another way to kind of get ahead of and do what we should do, not necessarily just what we have to do, to increase trust and transparency in the space.
Didn't you get some sort of a credit rating, or am I mixing?
Yeah, no, we
Or is
did
that not
actually. Yeah,
public?
yeah,
I'm always
yeah.
saying things
No, it's
that
okay.
I'm
No,
not
I'll get
supposed
it.
to say.
Yeah, on this one you're good. So we actually
Okay.
just we announced so ADIO Ratings, which has a lot of ex ratings agency people from some of the major firms that the industry knows well, and they looked at our structure of our Bitcoin backed loan, and they rated it, and so we have a very low proof of loss, and we're actually working on that with them, and this is right now it's new, right, because it's the first CFI lender that's gone through this process, but we're excited to have that public. And yeah, it's available to anyone that wants it. It's on our LinkedIn page. So
Yeah, that's incredible.
yeah.
I don't think are you guys the first in the entire space?
Actually, to their credit, Compound Treasury, I think that Compound has a centralized aspect of them as well. So they have like a prime brokerage arm. So back in 2021, S&P rated Compound's prime business as well. So we were, I guess we're the first CFI, but they were technically the first lending protocol to get theirs done.
That's not a lot. I mean, if you're looking for, uh, you know, some kind of stamp of approval, I'm just saying if you're a traditional guy, there's not a lot in the space yet, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
exactly. Yeah,
Coinbase,
and
of
and I,
course. Yeah, go ahead.
I think it goes on the way of how we think these loans are going to get funded, right? So, like anything, the first capital in a business is, angel investors, those with the foresight to say this is interesting, that can make their decision with their own capital. Then it's the crypto-friendly institutions that came in next. Right now, we're talking to a lot of very large credit funds that are saying, "Hey, we like the risk reward of this business," and I think eventually it goes the way that, again, real estate mortgages and credit card debt and student debt is done, and it becomes a securitization product. So we're kind of like halfway through the journey to get better cost of capital and really distribute this product into the broader traditional financial system. And the ratings aspect is one piece of that, because again, what everyone's struggling with is standardization. How do I get my head around this stuff? There's too much to understand. Can somebody simplify it? And that's what these ratings do, is someone does a bit of work here and they can put a stamp on it and they go, great, okay, now I can trust this entity and it fits within a process that I know very well.
Do you find that that's been a big attractor for business for you? Or because I don't hear it being discussed much. Now, I know you guys, you can't do everything all at once, but in terms of marketing that fact, it would seem real important to me.
Yeah, we're working on it, Dan. I think it's come up a lot in tons of conversations as we've gone to source more dollars for our loan book. I mean, we've been growing so quickly this year. We've been doing almost $1 million of new retail loans every day. And it's a pretty cool business, because I mean, think about how it is to approve Bitcoin-backed loans versus going in for a traditional loan at a bank, right? The amount of paperwork, the red tape that's involved, and we're able to process loans literally as we sleep because of the automation that's involved, right? And so the volumes have increased dramatically, and that's been a good concern for us, is how do we make sure the supply of capital side keeps up with the demand. And so we've been pounding the pavement for most of this year to educate more groups on why this is a great type of loan product to be participating in.
Yeah, I mean, just tell people on the call broadly from Q3 23 until today, what is the percentage growth rate in the business?
Oh, I mean, so we've done 1.6
I know what
billion
it is.
yeah, I mean, so we would have been at, like, I think we're 3.7x year over year on revenue. So it's been it's interesting because you invested in 2021. And the industry went through a really tough time with all the issues that happened in November of that year. But we're back at the same levels, but we're far more profitable than we were during that year. So our revenue is slightly higher than where we were, but we're making way more money just because the business has been through this great stress test, and we've gotten rid of all the things that were not core focus, and we figured out, admittedly some of it because we had to, how to operate the business more efficiently. And that not only makes our business better, it allows us to build a better product for our clients because we can pass loans through at a better rate. Like I think today we can do 3 to 4 times the amount of lending at a similar cost base to where we are today. So the business is just going to scale immensely as more people come into this and are interested in the product.
Yeah, 3.7x, not too bad. And yeah, we didn't get into this much, but you did a very good job cutting costs and getting very lean during the bear phase. So when the same, revenue line popped back up to where it is now, of course, profitability exploded. And, there aren't that many companies in the crypto space. I mean, we own many of them, but that are actual, profitable, net profit. And I think that's impressive. And the next bull part of this bull phase hasn't even really started. We've just gone back
Hmm.
to where we were. And, if you follow some of the people in the space, my goodness, all these young guys complaining about how the market's been so terrible, this and that. And I'm thinking we're at 60,000. Many of our companies are back to their peaks in revenue from 21. Okay, it's not, you know, gangbusters, but it's pretty great right now. And you
Yeah.
guys, I think, exemplify the type of company that really learned and managed that bear phase well. And, we'll have another one after this bull run finishes, whether it's in end of 26 or 27, you'll have another bear phase to manage through, but, you'll be that much better, and that much more prepared for it when it happens. Speaking of the future a little bit, so talk to us a little bit about the future. I mean, what do you see? Where do you see your company, 5 years from now? Are you, going to be a public entity? Are you going to get bought by somebody? Are you going to run this until you're 85? What's the plan? What's the plan?
I think then, we obviously can't predict exactly where we'll end up. So I always, just think about how do we get ready for anything. And ironically, whether you think the company is a great acquisition target or you think it's going to be public, I think most things are the same that you need to do, right? You need to get the business in great financial shape first and foremost. You need to have great, if someone looking at buying the business, they want to know it's going to grow. And if you're selling the business into the public markets, the same is true as well. You have to show strong growth to show investor interest. So, I think they're all kind of aligned as far as, our objectives. It was actually, speaking, at someone, on one of the listings agency yesterday, just to check exactly that, hey, if we wanted to list, 12 months from now, am I missing anything? This is what I'm working on. Is my checklist, missing any
Well,
line items, right? And so
and
that's
we
where we're
can
working
help
on.
you with that
Yeah.
too. And the board, of
Yeah.
course, can help you with that too. I have to say your interactions with the board, especially during the bear phase, but even now have been super professional and changed a lot from the beginning. I really think that it's you've professionalized in a way, and it's that many crypto companies, as you know, they're run by young guys like yourselves, but they're a little more cavalier towards things and drives me nuts.
Yep.
But you guys, your team, it just, everything seemed to, the bear phase seemed to be an accelerator for you. It was one of
Yeah.
those things where truly you had maybe some, you turned lemons into lemonade a little bit, right?
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, forced a great focus, and I think we've got a better business today because of it. And the automation is huge. I mean, obviously AI is the buzzword of the last 12 months, but we've got a really strong data team, and that's been a big aspect that's really helped
Yeah,
us
yeah.
focus. I mean, yeah,
Talk a little. We only have 3 more minutes, but talk about the AI impact because I don't think anybody on this call came into the call thinking, that there would be AI discussed, but you guys have used it in a huge way to help run your
yeah.
business. business. So maybe just outline that a little bit. I think even us at 10T and 1RT, we've been learning from you guys as well.
Yeah, of course. So happy to talk through that. I mean, well, given all of our loans are uniform as far as the data available, we've been first able to aggregate all the information that's coming in and get real-time updates. So we have a system, obviously, simple name, Ledn BI, that shows our volumes progressing by the minute and how everything's flowing in. Any financial key aspect that you'd like to know about our loans is available real time. And what we're working on is we're getting to a place where our financial statements will eventually be able to be generated real time as well. So we don't have to wait for this 60 days plus the quarter to figure out how we've done. Every day we can check on our performance. And then what we've also been able to do is link in things like client service tickets are coming in, where we can think about the tone of those client service tickets. How are people feeling about the product? Why are that? What information is that informing on product decisions that we're making? So instead of the traditional thing where we're spending 80% of the time to get the information and 20% of the time to analyze the information, it's like 20 and 80. So we have the information available. Now we can say 80%. What does this mean? How does this inform what we're talking about? And we also have an aspect of ChatGPT. We've got an integration where we can ask our own systems any question about how the volumes or other information is progressing. The other thing that we found is, even for compliance, there's a lot of systems that you need to do. So we're trying to tweak that into what can we do with that information, and how can we make it more informative for our products as well. And even just simple stuff, right? We've got all these compliance systems, but everything's kind of siloed, where when you check someone on the sanctions list, how does that compare with the blockchain monitoring that we have to do? So it pulls it all in one, and it gives our team better information, like an alert system that tells them more what they need to know than having humans compile information that's more data aggregation. So it's made everyone's job better, and is up the level that everyone's thinking at as a team. So we're now operating with half the people that we had in the 21 sector. But again, we're doing more volume and we're more profitable business because of those changes in processes and technology.
And what a tagline: AI, crypto, Bitcoin, lending business, AI driven. Uh, I mean, it hits on a lot of things that are very interesting.
Yeah.
And the fact that are really, just about alone in the space, with a handful at
Yeah,
most
exactly.
other players, it's a very, very interesting story. Potentially it could be for a listing in a few years. I still think the next 18 months, excuse me, the next 18 months are going to be your best.
Yeah.
So and we love being involved with you guys. So um, that's all I have. I'm being told we have 45 minutes. So look, Adam, this was a great chat. You can see I'm a little under the weather, but excited to see just how well you've done. And now you're really ready for the next phase of acceleration, I think, in the space. And if anybody has
Thanks.
questions, please, either follow up with us or follow up with Adam's team at Ledn. Maybe I give you the last word. Adam, anything?
Yeah, I mean, just excited to keep building in the space. So look forward to a lot more coming from Ledn. And of course, if you have any questions on our products, definitely reach out. And thanks so much for the time, Dan. Appreciate being part of the inaugural episode here.
All right. Thank you. Thanks,
Okay.
everybody, for joining.
Thanks everybody for joining.